I think there are several things to take away from Hugh Freeze comments on Monday.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Quick bonus edition of the show today to talk about everything Hugh Freeze said at his press conference on Monday. We'll touch on the running back situation, as well as an interesting answer that he said about the tight ends, specifically Preston Howard, the defense, the offense, the offensive line, all of it. Let's start with the biggest question. Who scored today on the offense? Who looked good today offensively? And where are they moving forward? I think Hugh Freeze was pretty consistent. He said it twice at least in his messaging today, talking about how the offensive situation has improved from last week to this week. He says he feels really good about the run game and how it's improved, as well as the general RPO situation. It has improved. The pocket passing, it seems to be, I mean, he's not really holding back. He's saying that it's lagging behind and they're having to spend extra time on that, is kind of what it seems. Now, I think there's a few aspects of this. One, like, I don't think that's why you bring Jackson Arnold in to be a pure pocket passer. And others, you know, what's the availability situation of these receivers? Like, it's still meshing. And this has been kind of a thing that for folks who have been pro Jackson Arnold, pro Hugh Freeze, pro Auburn offense, pro Auburn in general, it's been pretty consistent from that side of the Auburn fan base, where it's been like, yes, the defense is set to dominate early in fall camp and the offense will slowly catch up. I think all of those arguments could possibly come into play here as well. Hey, and maybe this coaching staff is putting Jackson Arnold in this offense in those situations to help get them better before they head to Waco next week to start the season. He said Omar Mabson had a long explosive run, said Damari had 2 explosive runs. He mentioned Jeremiah Cobb had some explosive runs. And then Cam and Horatio Fields, they had some explosive long passes that they caught. So, of course, Cam Coleman, Horatio Fields there. So, once again, like, I don't need the Auburn offense to dominate the Auburn defense. In fact, I actually think that might be bad. But I do want the offense to have moments. And it seems like they've had moments. Freeze also talked a little bit about, you know, Jackson Arnold being good with his legs. Like, what does that look like when you're watching film back? And it's like, could he have done something here? Would he have been down here? Like, what exactly does that mean? And I think that's also going to be part of this too, where Jackson Arnold, we've talked about this in the past when with athletic quarterbacks, it's like you don't really know. You don't really know exactly what's going to happen because everything is called dead so early because you got to protect the quarterback. So curious to see what happens with that moving forward. But the pocket passing, that's the question. And can you go through games and install game plans with just the running game and the RPO? I think that can be a big part of it. Can't be all of it, but I do think that could be a big part of it. So from a scheme standpoint, I do think you can call around that if they choose to do so. And once again, we talked about it a ton this morning. How much of the issues on the pocket passing is because of who Auburn's going up against in practice? It's of what we think is going to be a very good SEC defense, especially when you look at the back end and those defensive backs. Auburn will not play many teams on the schedule that have the defensive backs that Auburn has. And that's something that we've all got to kind of hold on to and hope that's part of it. And something that Hugh Freeze talked about before that was a similar perspective, but on the offensive line. He talked about how, like, in pass protection situation, like, it's impossible to not have one-on-one battles. And we've talked about that a lot from the defensive side of it with, okay, Keldrick Falk, Kieron Crawford, Malik Blockton. Like, you can't double all of these guys. And in a lot of situations, it's tough to double 2 guys. We haven't really had that conversation from the offensive side. And it sounds like a lot of these guys, and he highlighted, hey, maybe it's because our edge guys are really good, which makes me think it's offensive tackle. And so is that Xavier Chaplin on the left side? Is it Mason Murphy on the right side? Is it subbing in guys like Tyler Johnson and Tutal Miller? I mean, it's impossible to know for certain, but it did seem like they haven't been consistent enough to Hugh Freeze's liking up to this point. And he did say, like, is it because of our edge guys and they're explosive and they're really good? And obviously you hope that's the case. But at this point, they're not consistently winning one-on-one battles on the offensive side. The flip side is the defensively. It's like, okay, we've talked about how much we believe in Xavier Chaplin, and other folks really believe in Mason Murphy. I've had my questions since he got here, but how many offensive tackles could be better than that on Auburn's schedule in the SEC? I don't know. I mean, it's too early to tell. I believe in Xavier Chaplin. We'll see exactly what happens with that. Other notes on the offense, they said 0 turnovers today, which is probably my biggest concern. So that's awesome. Said there were several good, dirty runs, which I think was specifically when it comes to Baylor. If Auburn can make it messy, if Auburn can make it physical, a dirty game as far as, it's just not, no offense is like just kind of breaking out and breaking free. If you can kind of make it a scrum, especially if it's supposed to rain, which I don't know how they know that so far ahead of time, but I saw that somewhere. We'll see. But yeah, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I like Auburn's chances a little bit more if they can make it a little messy, make it a physical game, make it about, who's tougher. I think that will benefit Auburn. The consistency, though, of the messaging on Auburn from Auburn head coach Hugh Freeze today, it was that they've improved. The offense has improved from where they were a week ago, and that the drop back passing game is lagging a little bit behind. He said both of those things twice, and I think that's important to note in Hugh Freeze's messaging for where the Auburn offense is and so on. I want to talk about some of the defense in a second, as well as the tight end in just a moment, right here on the special edition of Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time's the best place to buy tickets. I don't care if it's for the Auburn-Baylor game. I don't care if it's for an Atlanta Braves game. It's the best place to buy tickets. You could do it in like 2 or 3 taps. You can see the view from your seat. You can toggle on the all-in pricing so you know exactly what you're going to spend when you select those tickets. Oh, yeah, and you can save up to 60% by like waiting to the last minute to buy tickets, which is super, super exciting. Download the Game Time app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase today. Game Time, last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Before we move to the defensive side of the ball, he was asked about the running backs, which is everybody's biggest, maybe not everybody's, is one of my biggest questions. And he was asked about the general picture of the running back room. And without skipping a beat, he said, Damari, Austin, is the most complete. And he said, Jeremiah Cobb has the experience. And then he said, and Darrell's coming along, and Omar Mabson's been impressive, and Alvin will get there. He's been banged up, which is the first time I've heard Alvin's name all fall camp. I hope he gets better because I really, really like Alvin Henderson. But yeah, I said Damari was the most complete and Cobb was the most experienced. And so now, is that him saying that those guys are the favorite to be RB1 and RB2? I don't know. But usually when Freeze says something, like, he means it. You can say what you want about the guy, but he's probably telling the truth as far as how he feels about it. So we'll see. But that makes me think, okay, I assumed all offseason Damari would be RB1. Some of the early reports in fall camp made me doubt that a little bit. And now Hugh Freeze's comments today makes me think, okay, yeah, it probably is Damari. It probably is Damari. What do you think about that? I'm genuinely curious what people's response to his comments on that were. And then he was asked about tight end, specifically Preston Howard, how they brought him in. And he said, he's become a polished route runner. They've been working with him. And then he quickly added, and Brandon Frazier is a guy who can help you in the passing game as well. And then he said, and look, we're going to rely on Tate Johnson, in the running game. I'm not going to ask him to run, a 12-yard route. I don't think that's Tate's strength. I don't think he'd mind me telling you that. but I think these tight ends are going to have roles. And so Preston Howard, Brandon Frazier, maybe kind of the guys that could do a little bit of both. He did say that both of them need to be a little bit better in the running game. I think that's where Tate Johnson will come in, maybe like almost like a third offensive tackle in certain situations. So all of that is worth noting moving forward. One of the first things he talked about was, where the defense needs to get better and how the defense is doing a good job impacting the quarterback, which has been, once again, we've kind of talked about this from the other point of view and how it might have been concerning from the offensive perspective. But from a defense perspective, that's your job. You want to impact the quarterback negatively as much as you possibly can. And it seems like that's happening. He did say that next step, though, is they have to cage the quarterback better, which is making sure they're contained. That was something that Auburn wasn't super great at the start of the season last year. Then they got, I think, much better over the course of the season. And if you can contain Auburn's quarterbacks, when you look at Jackson Arnold and Deuce Knight and Ashton Daniels, like, okay, all of a sudden, it's like if you can contain that versatile, dynamic, athletic, dual threat quarterback room, you can probably contain or cage whoever's on your schedule. Now, I don't think this is going to be a big deal against Baylor. I know Cam Stewart of Locked On Baylor said that Sawyer Robertson, their quarterback, is sneaky athletic, and I do believe him. Like, that doesn't shock me, but I don't think that's how he's going to be used. He wants to throw the football because he has a good arm. So I do think it's nice that Auburn has a little bit of time to figure this out until really they go to Norman to play John Mateer. And then the following week when they go to College Station to play Marcel Reed, those two guys, if you let them out of the pocket, they will beat you over and over and over again. Not as concerned about that with Sawyer Robertson because he wants to throw the ball. He's a passer first. I believe that he can get outside of the pocket, but I do think Auburn will have the athleticism to keep up with him. The other guys, it might get a little interesting. So I do think they have about a month or maybe a few weeks of the first part of the season to kind of get their feet set there. He was asked about the linebacker room, and the recording I watched of the presser, I couldn't really hear the question super well. I don't know if he asked about a specific linebacker or just the linebacker room as a whole, but the takeaway from that is, and he said it, and then he had to reemphasize that what he was saying was true. And it's like, okay, all right. I think you've kind of earned, when you're saying something at a press conference, I believe you, Coach Freeze. But he said that he wasn't even fully aware of who the ones and who the twos are in the linebacker room, which is a little interesting because when you look at the linebacker room, there are some questions about the linebacker room as far as, okay, who's going to step up? But my argument since fall camp has started has been, okay, there's so many linebackers where I just kind of feel like they have enough options where one of them will step up. But Robert Woodyard, DeMarcus Riddick, Xavier Atkins, JJ Falk, Elijah Melendez, and then Wheatland as well. It's just going to kind of be an interesting room. He said that he feels good about the six guys that are there. And so I'm curious, if that's good or not. I don't think there's a crazy drop off from 1 to 6, the way he was talking about it. But also, I don't see a world where DeMarcus Riddick's not a key part of it. And I don't see a part of it where, Wheatland isn't a part of it either. So we'll see exactly how the linebacker room shapes up. But overall, my biggest takeaways from Hugh Freeze's comments on Monday was that the Auburn offense has improved from week 1 to week 2 under the situation of running game and RPO, and then that pocket passing is lagging a little bit behind. And then he reemphasized a few times that the offensive line, they are losing one-on-one battles, and they're not winning those as consistent as he may like. So take all that for what it's worth. Those were my takeaways from Hugh Freeze's presser on Monday. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And if you're tuning in on audio, please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps the show out a ton. Guys, we're so close. We are so close to football season being back. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.